This is the Principles of Nutrition, Lesson C, looking to build on our understanding of the micronutrients and the macronutrients. We're going to look a little bit more into the terminology that's used when we look at nutrition and diet, in particular DRV, RDA, RDI and GI, so we'll know what all of these are and what they're all about. We'll have a little bit look at food labels and how to read them and how to interpret them in the right way for yourself and for your clients. We'll understand the significance of healthy food preparation, and we'll also look a little bit at a research task where if you want to find out more about the relationship between nutrition, physical activity and body composition, you'll be able to do so. But the first thing I want to look at is this, alright, DRVs, or dietary reference values. And if we have a little bit of a look at the graph, what we can see, going from left to right now, okay, we have lower reference nutrient intake. We have right in the middle, estimated average requirement, and on the right, reference nutrition intake. And essentially, what this graph shows us is that the vast majority of the population will need quite a lot of nutrients, alright, in order to live a healthy life. There might be a few people who can get by without too much. There might be people at the other end of the spectrum who need a little bit more than average in order to have enough in their body for them to function and live a healthy, happy life. But the majority of the people will need to have a lot of nutrients in order to live their life. And the way that we calculate how much macronutrient or how much micronutrient people should be having is we used to use something called RDA, and we now use something called RDA. So RDA was, or what was known as, or it's still known as, but it's not used anymore, recommended daily allowance, alright? Essentially the recommended daily allowance is something that came out in the Second World War to give people guidelines on minimal nutrient intake that they needed so they didn't get sick during the war, basically. So you need to have so much of this so that you're not going to get sick. That's what RDA was all about. Now what we have is RDI. So this is recommended daily intake, and this system tells us the minimum amount of each nutrient we need to be taking in each day. Nutrient levels have increased in the RDI compared to the RDA. You know, food is much more prevalent. People have a lot more income for food. Food isn't rationed like it was during the war, so we can get more in, and therefore nutrient values in this RDI are higher than they were in the RDA, but are still based on preventing deficiency and disease rather than achieving optimal health. So when we look at this, it's not saying that if you hit all these goals, you're going to be the most healthy person you can be. It's saying that you're going to be guarding against disease, really, and getting sick. But the RDIs do not take into account in any way individual needs. You know, they're not looking and saying, right, well, you're a triathlete, so you're going to up your carbohydrate intake to this. You're a sedentary person, so you need to reduce this to this. You're a bodybuilder, so protein intake will need to be here, carb intake will need to be here, etc, etc, etc. They're just guideline figures for the vast majority of the population. However, they do give us a rough framework to work from, and they can help us in our jobs as personal trainers. Just to recap, actually, RDA, recommended daily allowance, RDI, recommended daily intake. And the next acronym I want to look at is the glycemic index, and we touched on it earlier on when we looked at carbohydrates. And the glycemic index is the scale that really measures the rise of blood sugar when we take in carbohydrates. So what we can see on this graph is we've got, on the left, we've got someone taking in some normal amount of 50 gram of carbohydrate. So that could be 50 grams of sweet potato, for example. On the right, we've got someone taking in pure, or really pure, not messed around with, just pure glucose, okay? And what you can see on the left is what we want going on in the body. We want nice steady rise in blood sugar, nice steady rise in insulin to take that sugar around the body and transport it where it needs to be. And then as it comes back down nice and gradually, lasts for about 3 hours or so before we need any more carbohydrate, and then it's back down at zero and it's running steady from there. Conversely, if we look at the high glycemic index, it goes up, it peaks after an hour, and then it crashes, and it really does crash. And anyone who's ever if you've had a whole pack of Haribo in like 20 or 30 minutes watching a film or at work one afternoon, you'll know what I'm talking about. You eat all that sugar, you have a big spike, you're full of energy, and then you have the crash and you've got no energy and you feel like going to sleep, or you feel like you need to take in more sugar. That's when you eat real high glycemic index foods. And for us to have healthy people, what we want to be doing with our clients, we want to be looking at eating those lower glycemic index foods, particularly when we're not training, alright? So if we're not training till, 4 p.m, there's no, we don't want any high glycemic index around in the morning in particular. We want it nice and steady throughout the day. Maybe we want a little bit of a peak before we train or after we train to help uptake of nutrients, but we want to keep it steady in the most part and avoid those big crashes, because you can see that blood glucose wise we're going below zero, right? We're in a worse situation from where we started. If we look here, we're at zero when we started. We've got this big spike, but then we're below where we started, and that's not what we want. We want to keep it steady throughout the day. And what I want to take some time to look at is marketing and advertising, because food packaging, it's really critical, because if you don't understand, or if your clients don't understand what they're taking into their body, then they're never going to hit their target nutrition. And we're talking about some fine margins here. If we need someone to be on a 1,600 calorie diet, 1,006, well, that's a bit low, so 2,000 calories per day, and what happens is they're taking in 2,100 calories per day. Over the course of a week, alright, they're going to be having 700 more calories, and that's a lot of calories. That's going to be the difference between losing weight and reaching their goals, or being on track and getting the body that they want. So if they can't understand what they're taking in, and if you can't understand and educate them about it, then they've got a lot less chance of reaching their goals. And everything on a food package is there to increase the chances of it being purchased. Alright, it's not there for us as PTs to look and see what we really and make a good decision about what we're going to eat. All the stuff on here is, so if we look at all these little logos and stuff, they're all about getting us to eat more food. They don't particularly help us out. And the colour, the shape, the serving size, the fonts, all that sort of stuff goes against us. And you'll see loads of claims on products like it's organic, it's fat free, it's reduced this, it's reduced that. But it's knowing what all this stuff means that's going to help us to make some more educated decisions. So there are some laws around this. And in particular, we want to pick up on low fat. So less than 5% fat by weight. Alright, so less than 5% of the product is fat. Okay, that is a low fat product. Low calorie must contain fewer calories than the original product. So we could have something like a pizza, alright, and instead of my pizza having on it salami and potentially some other more pepperoni, some of the more fatty cuts of meat, if I used a lower fat cheese and I used some chicken instead of the pepperoni, yes, it's going to be a healthier pizza and it's going to have lower calories, but it's not going to be as good for me as eating a meal of chicken breast with some vegetables, alright? So low calorie doesn't necessarily mean it is a low calorie product, it just means that it's lower calorie than the original. Fat free is less than 0.5 grams of fat per 100 grams. So you're still going to be getting some fat in those fat-free products. And what we also need to be careful is if they've taken all the fat out of a product, what have they put into it to replace that fat? So it's often the case that if something's fat-free, the fat will have been replaced by sugar to make it taste good. So you need to be careful. Just because something says fat-free, something's fat-free, but it's gained another 30 grams of carbohydrate per serving, it's not going to be a good choice for us. We're going to be better off going with the normal option. So if you look at something like yogurt, for example, is quite a popular fat-free yogurt, hasn't got this, hasn't got that. But when you look at it and you look at how much sugar and how much carbs are in the fat-free version, you're better off making a more educated choice and going for the normal all-fat Greek yogurt rather than a refined fat-free one. Reduced fat, all that means is it has 25% fat less than the original product. So it's the same as low calorie, alright? Yeah, it's got reduced fat, it's got 25% less than the original, but it could still be something that's really, really, really fatty. It's not necessarily a healthy thing for us to be eating. We have organic. So organic must comply with standards requiring to no use of chemical, pesticides, fertilizers, antibiotics, etc. Alright? So our organic stuff hasn't got any chemicals added to it, which is absolutely fantastic. But it doesn't mean that absolutely everything that's organic that we eat will be good for us. Organic meats, for example, organic steaks in particular, will still have a high content of fat in them. Sure thing, they're going to be healthier and have less chemicals than something that's been raised in a non-organic way, but they might not be necessarily the best choice for that person to meet their nutritional needs. So having an awareness of these facts and figures means that we can make more educated choices when it comes to recommending, because that's all we're doing as PTs, we're recommending. We're not dietitians, we're not nutritionists, we're just recommending things that our clients may want to do. Many other terms are unregulated and don't have a specific meaning, but be careful for the marketing jargon. So, what we're interested in, we're not really interested in the front of the packet, we're interested in what's on the back, and we haven't got we have on the next slide actually, we've got a food label to look at, but it says here, look at list of ingredients, for example, packet, and what order do they come in. And some of you might already know this, but the order that they come in is essentially it's by how prevalent they are, how prevalent that ingredient is in the product. If I'm looking and I've got maybe a tin of tomato soup, for example, I'm wanting tomatoes to be the first ingredient on that list, because I'm expecting the vast majority of that product to be made up by tomatoes, and essentially that's the way that all the food labelling works. The ingredient that weighs the most is listed first, and the ingredient that weighs the least is listed last. So we could have something like tomato soup, and the ingredients could be tomatoes, water, we might be seeing stuff like salt, might be seeing some kind of maybe some kind of sort of herb in there, like oregano, or it depends what the soup is, but that's what I'm expecting. If I see a label for tomato soup and I'm seeing stuff like tomatoes, fructose, which essentially is sugar, if I'm seeing corn syrup, if I'm seeing flavourings, alright, and they're taking up if they're on there, never mind taking up, the first 2 or 3 spaces, I know that it's not going to be a particularly healthy product. If I'm looking at a good example I like to use is peanut butter, alright? The ingredients I want in my peanut butter are peanuts, alright? There's absolutely no need for any other ingredients in your peanut butter. If you're seeing chemicals on there that you don't understand and it looks like something, that from a chemistry lesson, it's not going to be a healthy product. And again, you go back to tomato soup, the ingredients should be tomatoes, water, maybe there's some other vegetables in there for flavouring, maybe there's some herbs or some salt and pepper. Apart from that, what else do you want in your tomato soup? Okay, let's have a look at food label nutrition. And this on the right hand side is what a typical food label will look like. And the first thing I want to point out, I'm going to try and go through the points on the left. So what nutrients are listed, what order they're in, how can this be useful. But what I want to point out first of all, alright, it says serving size 2, 1 pizza, 284 grams, alright? So what you've got to look at first of all is, if you're going to eat the whole pizza, alright, you're going to need to double all of the amount on this label, okay? Because the amounts that they give you, as you can see here, the amounts are per, let's go back. The amounts are per serving, alright? They're not for the whole pizza. So, if you eat the whole pizza, you're going to have to double all of this. So, if we look at this, amount per serving, there are 740 calories in the whole pizza. Alright, so if you're a woman, for example, normal guidance for a woman, a sedentary woman, somebody who's not doing the exercise, it's going to be about 2,000 calories per day. Alright? If you're having 740 of them from half of your pizza, you need to be aware that you've only then got roughly 1,260 calories to make up the rest of the meals in your day. Calories from fat, 324 calories are coming from the fat, which again is high. But let's work our way down the values so we can look at them in a bit more detail. We can see all of the nutrients. We have total fat, we have saturated fat, we have carbohydrate, and we have protein. We can see all of those nutrients on there. You can also see that there's some calcium. Alright, what order are they listed in? Covered that off. Alright, and how can this be useful for customers? So it's all about how you interpret the label. And it's really about knowing the goals of your client. You need to know that your client needs to have, for example, 120 grams of protein per day. You can then look at this product and see, yes, there are 32 grams of protein in it, so that's going to be okay for me to eat. That's going towards my protein target for the day. What you might also be looking at is, you might have, if we look at the saturated fat, there are 14 grams of saturated fat, right, which is quite a lot of saturated fat. So if you're aiming to stay away from saturated fats and maybe have 10, 20 grams a day, you know that once you eat this pizza, no more saturated fat for you that day. Same thing, total fats. How many fats do we want to have in a day? Are we having 36 grams of fat a day? Are we having 70 grams of fat a day? We need to be aware. And you've got your percentage of daily value, okay? And this is based on, again, for the average population. So it's not, it's no way specific to individual athletes, but you can see that if the average person is having 70% of their saturated fat intake from this one meal, they're going to have to stay away from the saturated fat for the rest of the day. Stuff like carbs, 24%. So it's quite low in terms of carbs. We might want to go and hit the carbs through some of our other food sources. Sodium, 69%. It's very high. We're going to have to stay away from the salty food for the rest of the day. That's how you make decisions using food labels. It's about knowing what your intake needs to be for the day and then comparing it back to this and sticking to it, alright? And what we've got right at the bottom is you've got some of the average daily values, so what people should be having in a day. So the 2000, so that's women, this is men. So women should be having 2000 calories a day, men 2500, and again, repeating myself, but this is for people who don't exercise too much. And we're going to be looking at, total fat for a woman in a day should be 65 grams, okay? In this pizza, we have 36 grams. So yeah, roughly 55% of the intake, so it's pretty much correct. But it's being aware of what these intakes need to be and comparing it back and looking at what you're trying to do as an athlete or as a trainer. So it is level 3 qualification, and if you want to up your knowledge and you want to get sort of into a space where you're working more effectively, I'd suggest having a look and doing a bit of a Google search and a bit of research on some of these areas. So number one, the relationship between specific dietary factors and particular diseases. So look at overeating and heart disease. Look at fat intake and coronary heart disease. Okay? Relationship between diet, body composition and health. Look at and do some research around what type of calorie intake people should be having based on their needs. If you've got a 85 kilogram man who wants to gain some solid muscle mass, have a look and do some research around how many carbs should he be having per day, how much fat should he have per day, how much protein should he have per day, okay? And if you're particularly interested in an area, I'd suggest doing that. If you're if you've got a goal yourself at the minute, so if you're looking to maybe decrease body fat at the moment, do this research for yourself. Look at your weight, look at your height, and then look at your body type as well, and look at how many calories you should be having per day, how much protein, how much fat, how much carbs, and try it out for yourself. Get yourself on something like MyFitnessPal and be logging in those calories. And the only way that somebody will lose weight or gain weight is if they have the correct balance of calories and the correct balance of macronutrients. If you've got someone who wants to gain muscle mass and they're not eating enough protein, no matter what you are doing with them in the gym, they will never gain muscle mass. Same thing if you've got someone who wants to lose body fat. If they are eating more calories than they should each day, they will never, ever, ever lose that weight. That's what it comes down to. And if you're saying to someone that you need to have 2,000 calories per day and they're having 1,800 of them from fat and having no protein and carbs, it's not going to work. So you need to get your clients into the habit of tracking nutrients, and you need to be checking up on what they're doing too. And number 3, you might also want to have a look at the effects of different types of fat on blood cholesterol. We did cover that a bit when we talked about fat, so have a look at polys, monos, saturateds, and what they can do to the body's cholesterol. So, should have covered all these off. We should know what all those terms now mean, and we've really gone into detail and looking at the food label and how to interpret a food label. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going to continue looking at nutrition. We're going to delve off in the next presentation and look at some areas in more detail rather than a bit of an overview. So I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.